Dear Chosen One, they thought you would never do it. They were convinced you'd stay attached forever, that your compassion would keep you bound, that your guilt would silence your clarity. But one day, without warning, you let go. Not softly, not gently. You cut the cord with full awareness, with divine authority, with no room left for second thoughts. Because what looked like love, mentorship, or spiritual family was actually a higher form of evil, disguised in sacred language, cloaked in false wisdom, wrapped in emotional manipulation. You knew it, you felt it, and when you finally walked away without mercy, their collapse began. You need to stay with me in this video, because this wasn't just another breakup, another falling out, another spiritual shift. This was a full-on exorcism in disguise, a separation from something that had camouflaged itself inside your light for too long. They couldn't survive without your presence. Your energy was their anchor. Your empathy was their food. But once you awakened, you saw it clearly. It was never about love. It was about control. It was never about connection. It was about dependency. And now they are unraveling. Not because you harmed them, but because you stopped giving them access to your power. We're going to talk about this deeply and without fear. Because what you did wasn't cruel, it was sacred. And the reason they can't cope is because their entire identity depended on your submission. So if this already resonates, drop it in the comments now. I let go without mercy. Let the spiritual realm hear you say it. And if you're ready for the full revelation, like this video, subscribe now, and hit the notification bell. Because by the end of this message, you'll understand why letting go of the highest evil was the beginning of your highest freedom. You always felt something was off, but they were so convincing. They spoke like healers, moved like mentors, prayed like saints. They made you believe you were being supported, guided, even protected. But what you were really caught in was a soul trap, one wrapped in spiritual language, but rooted in energetic dependency. This was not love. This was spiritual extraction. Every time you confided in them, your strength diminished. Every time you leaned on them, your clarity blurred. And somewhere deep inside, you felt it. This wasn't God's covering. It was spiritual control. But your empathy kept you there. Your fear of being too harsh kept you quiet, until the silence inside you became louder than their voice. They had a way of making you feel spiritually indebted, as if they had given you something so sacred that walking away would be betrayal. But now you see the truth. You were never in debt to them. They were in debt to your light. You were the one bringing balance, insight, purity into a system that fed on confusion. And when you finally realized it, it shook your core. Because it meant that the guidance you were trusting wasn't from above. It was designed to keep you below. You weren't in a divine covenant. You were in a psychic leash. And the moment you let go, everything shifted. Not just in the relationship, but in the spiritual realm itself. At first, they didn't believe you'd actually leave. They thought it was another emotional reaction, another temporary pullback. They had seen you wobble before, hesitate, explain yourself, come back. But this time was different. This time, you didn't ask for their understanding. You didn't make a grand speech. You didn't explain your healing. You just left. Spiritually, energetically, emotionally, completely. You let go like someone who had finally seen the core of the parasite. And that's what scared them. Not your anger, not your boundaries, but your silence, your certainty, the way you vanished without needing closure. Because they knew the version of you who allowed their presence is gone. The one who second-guessed their intuition. The one who kept praying for a sign when the signs were screaming that you no longer exist. What stands in your place now is a sovereign soul, connected directly to God, and no longer tolerating anything that disguises domination as spiritual connection. You've become untouchable to the system that once fed off your insecurity. You've become invisible to the traps that once saw you as prey. That's why they can't cope, because the only way they held power was through your permission. Now they're scrambling, watching, trying to find cracks in your silence, hoping your softness will resurface, trying to lure you back through old tactics, messages, guilt, spiritual jargon, fake humility, but it doesn't work anymore. Because now you see the pattern. You see how they twist truth, how they manipulate timing, how they pretend to be concerned just to re-enter your field. But your field is no longer open, and it never will be again. Because when a chosen one truly lets go of a spiritual parasite, they never go back to being food. And here's the hardest part to admit. You didn't need a reason to leave. You needed a revelation. And when God gave you that revelation, it didn't come with emotions. It came with fire, with certainty, with an inner voice that said, "Enough." And that was all it took. Not a conversation, not a debate, not a ceremony, just clarity. And when you made that internal decision, heaven responded instantly, because you finally matched your soul's truth with your actions. And that alignment shook the unseen world like thunder. You were never supposed to carry the responsibility of healing them. But because of how they positioned themselves, above you, ahead of you, more evolved, you internalized the lie that their brokenness was your assignment. That if you just stayed a little longer, loved a little harder, sacrificed a little more, maybe they would change. Maybe they would evolve into the version they pretended to be. But the truth is, they never planned to evolve. They planned to keep you orbiting around their false light, drawing power from your loyalty, your compassion, your hesitation. And every time you put their growth above your peace, you dimmed. Every time you prioritized the bond over your intuition, you delayed your destiny. But that delay is over now. Because the illusion broke, and with it, so did the contract. They called it divine connection, but it was dependency. They called it guidance, but it was grooming. They cloaked their dysfunction in sacred language to keep you from questioning the imbalance. And every time you felt confusion in your spirit, they reframed it as your healing process. But now you understand. Confusion is not a sign of transformation. It's a sign of manipulation. And clarity doesn't come from proximity to them. It comes from proximity to God. The moment you distanced yourself from their voice, your own voice got louder. And when your voice aligned with truth, the fog lifted. That's when you saw the pattern. That's when you saw the trap. That's when you saw that staying would have cost you more than just time. It would have cost you yourself. And while they crumble now in silence, still pretending they don't notice your absence, the spiritual realm knows exactly what happened. A transfer took place. The power they borrowed from you has been returned. The light they siphoned from your soul is being restored. And the protection they had access to, because of your covering, is now revoked. That's why everything in their life feels unstable. Not because you cursed them, not because you wished them harm, but because your absence exposed how much they depended on your divine connection to keep their shadow life stable. You weren't just another person in their world. You were the last thread between them and grace, and they tore it. And still, you remain silent, not out of weakness, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Because when you finally understand the depth of spiritual warfare, you no longer waste energy trying to prove your side. You just walk away and let the truth do what it does best. Reveal. They might lie about you, twist your exit, frame your peace as pride, but heaven knows what happened. And every angel assigned to your life is rejoicing. Not because you fought back, but because you finally stopped fighting for what was never yours to carry. Your silence is sacred now. Your distance is your declaration, and your protection It was activated the moment you stopped defending their disguise. They weren't sent to walk with you. They were sent to test you. They were an echo of an old version of you, a mirror of the part that still believed you had to earn your worth. And you passed the test, not by defeating them, but by releasing them, by refusing to stay small, quiet, guilty. You let go without mercy, because mercy toward them had become betrayal toward yourself. That's what most won't understand, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your soul is to say, no more, not because you hate them, but because you finally love you enough to stop bleeding for someone who was never going to heal. And now, you're rising differently. You're not just free, you're fortified. You're not just lighter, you're wiser. The spiritual codes you've accessed through this rupture cannot be taught in books or sermons. They were earned in silence, in loneliness, in surrender. And now that you carry them, nothing false can stand in your field. That's why your atmosphere feels clearer, why your body feels stronger, why your mind is sharper. You're not operating from survival anymore. You're operating from alignment. And that alignment is more dangerous to darkness than any confrontation ever could be. They feel it too, even if they never say it. They feel the closing, the finality, the shift, that desperate pull to try to reopen the connection, masked in false humility or fake forgiveness. But there is no reopening what heaven has sealed shut. Not because you're bitter, but because you're clean. That cycle wasn't just toxic, it was strategic warfare. And now that you've unplugged from it, their reach no longer touches you. You're walking in new territory, guarded, elevated, seen by God, and they're still looking for you in the version of yourself that no longer exists. You didn't just walk away, you dismantled an altar, a spiritual structure that had been built slowly, over time, with flattery, guilt, twisted admiration, and false intimacy. You thought you were in a safe space, a connection of equals, a relationship of mutual purpose. But over time, you noticed the pattern. You were always the one apologizing, always the one explaining, always the one feeling too much or not enough. That wasn't love, that was programming. And once you saw the strings, you cut them with no hesitation, not out of rage, but out of reverence for your own soul. And when that altar fell, you didn't just get free, you collapsed something they had spent years secretly building. And that collapse is echoing now, in their thoughts, in their emotions, in their dreams. What they can't say out loud, they're screaming in the spirit. Come back, answer me, forgive me. Not because they've changed, but because your absence is exposing the hollowness they always knew they carried. You were the proof they were still connected to something divine. And now that proof is gone, and they can't fake it anymore. They can't sustain the illusion, because the light they borrowed has returned to its rightful owner, and they're standing in darkness that used to be masked by your radiance. You thought the price would be loneliness, but what you received was power. The kind that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't seek revenge, the kind that walks silently but carries the weight of heaven behind it. You stopped explaining your peace. You stopped offering clarity where people refused to be honest. You stopped giving energy to a war that was already over. And because of that, your life has shifted dimensions. The elevation is real. The clarity is sharper. The boundaries are unshakable. And the version of you they once knew, that version evolved into something they were never meant to reach. And yes, there are still moments of grief, of remembering what you hoped it could have been, of mourning the illusion. That's human. That's healing. But even in the grief, there is no regret. Because this was never about losing someone. It was about reclaiming yourself. And you did. You stood in the fire and refused to shrink. You watched the system fall and refused to rescue it. You allowed yourself to become the villain in their story just to finally become the hero in your own. And that is divine courage. That is spiritual mastery. That is what it means to let go without mercy. The ones who can't cope were never meant to carry your future. They were a part of your past, a chapter, a catalyst, a test, and they failed the test when they tried to make you smaller so they could feel bigger, when they confused access with ownership, when they used sacred words to build emotional cages. But you passed. You passed when you didn't go back, when you didn't entertain the bait, when you chose silence over drama, peace over guilt, truth over attachment. And now, the results are irreversible. What they lost wasn't just you. It was the version of themselves they pretended to be around you. And even now, the Spirit wants you to know that closure you were waiting for, you already gave it to yourself. That apology you wanted, you healed without it. That recognition you deserved, heaven already saw. And now, you're walking with angels who know your name, not the name they tried to redefine, but the one God whispered into your soul before you ever forgot who you were. That name is clean. That name is holy. That name is free. And from this point forward, you will never again need to justify the moment you let go of a higher evil with the full force of your light. You don't need them to understand. You don't need them to heal. You don't need them to wish you well, because your freedom is not up for negotiation. And the truth is, they don't miss you. They miss the version of you that tolerated the distortion. They miss the access, the attention, the emotional labor, the spiritual covering. That version of you, compromising, overly loyal, afraid of being seen as harsh, is gone. And what remains now is someone whole, someone honest, someone powerful enough to walk away from manipulation disguised as purpose. That's why they can't cope, because their power didn't come from within. It came from proximity to your light. And for the first time in a long time, you feel clean. Not perfect, not numb, but spiritually clean. Your atmosphere is lighter. Your discernment is sharper. You're not walking on eggshells anymore. You're not trying to anticipate moods, dodge passive aggression, or decode cryptic silence. You're not seeking permission to grow. And with that freedom comes a level of inner peace they'll never be able to access again, because that peace came through a war they never had the courage to fight. But you did. And that's why, from now on, you will only connect with those who meet you in truth, not in tactic. There are people watching your life right now, hoping you fall, hoping the silence was a mistake, hoping you'll need them again. But all they'll see is your expansion, your evolution, your elevation. Because when a chosen one breaks a false covenant with clarity and finality, there is no regression, only resurrection. You're rising from the ashes of spiritual confusion into the clarity of divine alignment, and they will have no choice but to watch in silence, as everything they tried to dim now becomes impossible to ignore. Your life is becoming the sermon they'll never forget, and what they're feeling now is not rejection, it's exposure. They were never abandoned. They were revealed. They were never punished. They were released. You gave them grace. You gave them time. You gave them silence to reflect, to grow, to heal. And instead, they weaponized your softness, interpreted your mercy as weakness, and assumed you'd always return. But now that the cord is severed, they're left facing their own shadow. And the scariest part for them is realizing you're not angry, you're just gone. And that kind of peace cannot be manipulated. That kind of detachment is divine. So let them talk. Let them twist the story. Let them pretend they were the victim. You don't owe the world your version of the truth. Your life will reveal it. Your light will confirm it. Your alignment will speak louder than any narrative they invent. And those who are spiritually awake will see clearly. They'll feel the shift. They'll recognize the pattern. And they'll come to you not with questions, but with confirmation. Because deep down, they've been through the same, and your courage will activate their own. You're not just healing for you, you're modeling what it means to choose yourself over spiritual abuse. And now, you walk differently. Your steps are slower, but more certain. Your energy is calmer, but more commanding. Your eyes are softer, but sharper. You've become what they feared most, a chosen one who knows their worth and no longer tolerates bondage in the name of love. You've become spiritually untouchable, not because you've become cold, but because you've become consecrated. And from this point forward, only what honors your soul will have access to your field. You've graduated from the illusion. You've shed the disguise. You've risen from the grip of the higher evil. They'll say you changed, that you got too deep, too serious, too distant. But what they're really saying is, you stopped being available for our dysfunction. They can't admit that it was never about your healing. It was about their control. And when control is gone, people rewrite history to protect their ego. That's okay. Let them. You're no longer here to manage anyone's perception of your growth. Your focus is on alignment, on peace, on purpose, on purity. And those things cannot be accessed by people who still need you to play small in order to feel big. This is what it looks like when a soul outgrows its oppressor. Not with rage, not with public confrontation, but with unshakable stillness. That's what you carry now. The stillness of someone who passed the test. The calm of someone who let the fire do its work. The peace of someone who walked through darkness with discernment and came out with vision. You're not bitter. You're built. You're not angry. You're aligned. And the people who once confused your silence with weakness are starting to realize it was the mark of transformation. Even now, they're trying to find new ways to reach you energetically. Through others, through prayers laced with guilt, through mutual friends, through memories. But nothing connects anymore. Because you didn't just walk away, you removed the spiritual contract. The legal right they once had to be in your field has been revoked by heaven. And the only energy that flows to you now is what's clean, clear, and commissioned by God. That's the power of sacred disconnection. It doesn't just remove people, it restores your original spiritual architecture. There's a version of you that was slowly dying in that connection. The version that kept asking for permission, that made excuses for red flags, that spiritualized dysfunction in the name of patience, that absorbed chaos in the name of compassion. But that version of you was never the real you. It was the version shaped by survival. And when you let go without mercy, you gave yourself permission to come home to your truth. And now, the real you is here. Not diluted, not performative, not afraid, just anchored in truth, fully owned and finally free. So what's next for you? Expansion without apology. Relationships without bondage. Purpose without guilt. You've been initiated into a new dimension of clarity. And from this point on, nothing fake can survive in your atmosphere. You'll sense it instantly. You'll feel the difference. Because once you've known the weight of a higher evil disguised as love, you'll never again fall for counterfeit light. You'll love from overflow, not from obligation. You'll speak from wisdom, not from wounds. You'll discern instantly what others take years to see. That's your new normal now. And if this word was confirmation, liberation, or fire for your spirit, then write the phrase, "I let go," in the comments to declare your spiritual liberation to the universe. May this video be a record of your soul rising. I also have a special request. Take this moment and like the button below, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell. We are building a community, and this helps it grow even more. I also want to take a moment to thank each soul who supports this mission through Buy Me a Coffee. Your generosity is sacred and deeply felt. My sincere thanks. If you feel motivated to support us too, the link is right there in the first comment pinned below. Now, before you go, there is another video on the screen waiting to take you deeper. Or binge watch the playlist. The journey will be incredible. Keep feeding your spirit to ascend even further. Thank you for watching. See you at the next revelation, and may God bless you.